Item selection, item selection, item selection. Probably one of the most critical parts of any team building guide or pretty much anything when it comes to Pokemon. Equipping your Pokemon with the right item is probably the key that will give you victory on the field. For example, you would not want to place a Focus Sash on something that is going to be really, really tanky. It's just not going to happen. What the Focus Sash and all these items are supposed to be doing is supposed to be aiding Pokemon that are weak in certain areas or are trying to perform a certain job and help them perform that job better. So, as I just said, the Focus Sash, what the Focus Sash does, we're going to be looking at each of these items one at a time. Not all of them, but probably the most common of them. And the first one we're going to be looking at is Focus Sash. So, Focus Sash is a very common item to be seen on any team. What its task is going to do is ensure that the Pokemon will survive a potential one-hit KO move, leaving it with 1 HP minimum. So if your Pokemon isn't super tanky or it doesn't have a lot of defenses, your Pokemon is probably going to be using a Focus Sash depending on what its task is going to be. For example, one of the most common Pokemon that I would strap a Focus Sash onto is probably my Prankster Murkrow. My Murkrow Buster is not exactly a very defensively invested Pokemon. I think he's probably only got at most defenses similar to what my Pheromosa has, maybe 50 or 60 or so, maybe a little bit more, but he's not going to survive a very strong hit. And if he ever comes up against either a Fairy type move or an Electric type move, heaven forbid he comes up against one of those. He will not survive those types of attacks. But the Focus Sash, however, will give him that chance to survive. It will allow him to survive that one extra turn to get maybe one more tail, maybe get a Tailwind off if he's going for if he went for a taunt the first turn, or if he wants to go for the Tailwind the first turn, he can get off a taunt to prevent any setups from the following turn. It will give him that chance to perform his task before he goes down, at least. That is what the Focus Sash is going to do. The next item we're going to be looking at are all three of the choice items. In this case, we're just going to be looking at Choice Scarf. So what Choice Scarf does is raise the speed of a Pokemon. It doesn't say it here, but it will raise the speed by 50%. However, it will be locked into the first move that it makes. So what Choice Scarf, Choice Band, and Choice Specs are each geared towards doing is giving a Pokemon that extra oomph they need to perform their task. If they're really strong, if they have really strong attack power, but they don't have the speed necessary to perhaps outspeed certain Pokemon, or if you just want them to outspeed a certain Pokemon, you strap a Choice Scarf on them and you just lock them into whatever move. That is why you see Choice Scarf Garchomp so often, is because Garchomp is a very strong Pokemon. It doesn't need a lot of help when it comes to, its attack power, but if it gets even a little bit of help, it's pretty much going to be unstoppable, which is why you constantly see so many Choice Scarf Garchomps. And if you have a Pokemon that is also really fast, but you need it to, hit a little bit harder just to make sure it hits, powers down those really defensive Pokemon, you give it the Choice Band. Same thing with the Choice Scarf. If you have a really strong special attacker that needs a little bit more help just to make sure it powers down a certain Pokemon, you give it the Choice Specs. That is what the choice items are for, just to give your Pokemon that boost they need to deal the damage they need to deal. The only downside is they're locked into the first item, or into the first move they use. So that is what you see people use this item for, and that's what this item is designed to be used for. For the next one is probably one of the most common all-purpose items, the Life Orb. So what the Life Orb does is it increases the power of a Pokemon's attack power by, I think, 20%. But in return, it takes like maybe 20% health for each turn. I don't know exactly if that's correct, but I think it's maybe 1/16 or so. I don't know off the top of my head. But that is what the Life Orb is supposed to do. It's supposed to increase a Pokemon's power output, and in exchange for this little extra damage boost, they have to sacrifice a bit of health each time they attack. So what the Life Orb is supposed to do is give Pokemon that don't need a lot of help, but maybe give them just a little bit more help. Again, I'm gonna bring up Garchomp as an example. Garchomp is very common to see a Life Orb on. It's very powerful, and maybe it just needs a little bit more help. Like I said, like I've been saying constantly, if you give Garchomp just a little bit more help, it's gonna just steamroll the opponent, as I said constantly. So that is what the Life Orb is supposed to do. You don't want to put the Life Orb on a Pokemon that's not going to be doing a lot of damage. For example, you wouldn't put it on, like, say, a Toxapex, whose main purpose is basically to stall the opponent out and poison or burn them with Scald and Baneful Bunker and Toxic damage. That's not what the Life Orb is supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be helping boost attack power, not boosting defensive Pokemon. So the next item we're going to be looking at are basically the healing berries that recover status inflictions. But for this one, we're going to be looking at a Lumberry. Lumberry is going to recover any Pokemon status problems. That's what it's going to be doing. What you want to be using the Lumberry for are Pokemon that are afraid, or Pokemon that are probably going to get hit by, say, paralysis. They're going to be hit by maybe burns, maybe confusion, something like that. That's what the Lumberry is geared toward. Pokemon that want to set up and don't want to deal with any status infliction shenanigans. For example, if the opponent knows you're going to be trying to set up and they may have, like, say, a Will-O-Wisp Pokemon, you want to put that Lumberry on your Pokemon that, is trying to set up and does not want to run the risk of being burned. Unless, of course, you're a Guts Pokemon and you're trying to bait out that burn. But that's for another video, another day. That's what the Lumberry is for. You want to put it on Pokemon that are trying to set up, or Pokemon you don't want to, say, run the risk of falling asleep, or maybe that's part of their strategy to, chesto resto, go to sleep then wake up because of the berry. That's pretty much what the Lumberry is geared towards doing. Speaking of berries, the next berry, probably the second most common berry you'll ever see, probably most common nowadays, not compared to the new buffed berries. We're going to be looking at the Citrus Berry. So, what the Citrus Berry does is, when a Pokemon drops below 50% health, they will instantly eat this berry and regain 25% of their maximum health. So that is what the berry is supposed to do. It's supposed to give a Pokemon a little bit of life in the middle of the battle, in case they're trying to, stay in the fight for as long as possible. That is what the Citrus Berry does. It's giving them just a bit more health in the fight. It's not a whole lot of health, and over the long term that little bit of health probably won't make much of a difference, but it will help them survive maybe that one extra hit the following turn. So that's what the Citrus Berry is supposed to be doing. The Citrus Berry wants to give a Pokemon extra longevity over the course of the battle, and that's what the Citrus Berry does. Speaking of giving Pokemon longevity over a battle, leftovers. Probably one of the most common items you will ever see on any super tanky Pokemon, or Pokemon that are just trying to stall you out. Leftovers will gradually restore health every turn if they've taken any bit of damage. I believe it's 1/8 their total health, and they will recover. You can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I am wrong, but over the course of the battle, as long as the Pokemon is holding leftovers, they will eventually fully restore themselves, provided they aren't taking any more damage. But if they are taking damage, that leftovers will allow them to keep staying in the fight. That is what the leftovers is designed towards. It's supposed to be used on Pokemon that, need to survive as long as possible, but at the same time aren't, supposed to be using items that aren't, supposed to... Oh my goodness, what am I trying to say here? Leftovers are meant for keeping Pokemon alive. There, just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Put the leftovers on Pokemon that are trying to stay in the fight for as long as possible. They can be put on any Pokemon, I will, admit that. I've seen people put leftovers on weird Pokemon that look like they wouldn't use the leftovers, but they have worked effectively because, that little bit of extra health can go a long way. It might be the difference between, surviving a battle and, losing the battle. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully you all learned something about these items and how you want to use them and how you want to be using them. Until next time, I am Imperator Davius, your Fedora wearing Retro-Ram, and I know I probably forgot a few items. Maybe I forgot the Assault Vest. I knew I forgot the Assault Vest. But hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!
Hey,